Boy George and Culture Club are ready to dazzle Wolf Trap in Vienna, Virginia this Thursday night. I spoke to Boy George about what to expect from the show and about the band's career, from Do You Really Want to Hurt Me to Karma Chameleon.
Hi, Jason.
Hey, Boy George, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP in Washington, D.C.
You're welcome.
We're here talking because Boy George and Culture Club are coming to the famous Wolf Trap in Virginia on Thursday, September 1st. I think the English Beat is opening up for you. It's going to be a cool show. What are we going to hear? Obviously, you have so many greatest hits you could do. But I also want to know, is there anything newer you're doing? I know Culture Club had Life in 2018. You did your solo stuff, cool karaoke during the pandemic. But is it a mix of sort of the old and the new?
It is a lot of hits, obviously, because that's what keeps the crowd in your pocket. So you always start with the biggest songs. And we try to kind of find some obscure songs of ours to stick in as well that sort of hardcore fans might say, you never do that song. You know, there's always arguments in the band of which old songs we've got. I mean, I guess we feel lucky that we have so many hits, so we can go, oh, we do this, do this. So yeah, we mix up, we do some great covers, some unexpected covers. You know, and yeah, we just, you know, there's a lot of love out there for us, and you know, we give it back. You know, it's like the energy, you know, at the shows has just been so electric.
Awesome. And I should have asked, where are you calling us from? Are you across the pond at the moment as we speak?
No, I'm in Utah. I've had a really nice day in Utah. We had a show here the other night, and I've been here for 3 days soaking up the mountain energy and just having a really nice time. And then we're heading off tonight to play, and the show keeps rolling.
Awesome. Just bouncing around the globetrotter like you are. All right, cool. Well, whenever I have someone on, I want to get into some of the big hits that you mentioned, but I always love to sort of go a little chronologically if we can. I know you were born in Kent, England in 61. What sort of like music did you listen to growing up? Like, I want to know what were some of those early seeds that, you know, would eventually become sort of your new wavy sound, but I want to know sort of the origin story of Boy George's music.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, because I'm a Gemini, I'm a bit of a cultural sponge. So even as a kid, I was listening to like 30s jazz, anything, any sleeve with a great cover. You know, any album sleeve with a great cover, I would want to know, well, this looks interesting. Is it interesting? So there was a mixture of things I heard on the radio, you know, like the big hits, Sonny and Cher, early Jacksons, all of that stuff. And then I really got into soul music in a big way, American soul music, Gladys Knight and the Pips, you know, the stylistics, you know, just really into Marvin Gaye, all of that stuff. And then reggae in England, like reggae in the 70s really blew my mind. Because, you know, London is a real Jamaican city. There's a lot of Jamaican people living in London. And that music was just blaring from everywhere. So, yeah. And then punk rock.
Of course.
You know, talk about like the best thing that could ever happen to a teenager, punk rock.
The best thing I ever do a teenager, punk rock. I love that. And I also love that you described yourself as a cultural sponge because you had formed Culture Club. It all ties together in 81.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, my musical education started really in the sort of early 70s. But I picked up some, obviously the Beatles, you know, were around, but they hadn't really become what they were going to become. They hadn't sort of taken us where they were going to take us. So, you know, mid-70s, all that stuff, you know, I was going back a lot, listening to old music, discovering things I didn't know about. Because, you know, I listened to Bowie in the 70s. Bowie sang about Bob Dylan. Bowie sang about Cahill Gibran, who was a, you know, Muslim poet. So Bowie led us to a lot of interesting artists, Lou Reed, Iggy Pop, you know, Patti Smith, all of that stuff. You know, once you start listening to music, it just pulls you all over the place, doesn't it?
Yeah, because you love one artist and then you're like, well, what inspired them? Then you go down that rabbit hole and then it's just a never-ending web of awesome music. And it all influenced your stuff.
It all leads back to Bach, I think.
All leads back to Bach?
Back to Bach, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where it starts for many.
It probably does, yeah.
There's this black hole noise now.
Yeah, if you trace the family tree of music back, it probably goes back to Bach. You're probably right. Well, cool. Tell me about the formation of Culture Club in 81. You know, it's during the whole, people have called it the New Romantic period. I guess later they'd call it the Second British Invasion.
You know, I would say at that point I was working in a shop. I was a bit of a face. Everyone knew me, but I wasn't really doing anything. I was just a show off, you know, with no job. And all my friends were starting bands. You know, a lot of my friends were in punk bands already, and then this whole new romantic thing started, and people were just, getting more experimental and interesting, and the clubs were getting exciting, and I decided I'm going to start a band. I'd always been told that I could sing. I always used to get comments on my voice when I was a kid. People say, "Oh, you've got a lovely voice," and eventually, and I wanted to be a goth. Let me tell you, the beginning of Culture Club, we were called In Praise of Lemmings. That was our original name, and so far away from the jolly, group that we became. But I was into Susie and the Banshees. I have a Susie's tattoo on my left arm, and I wanted to be a goth. But a lot of bands, they sort of create themselves accidentally, and I think that is what happened with Culture Club. There were so many strong personalities in the group. It just morphed into this really interesting sort of melting pot of music that wasn't very English, it wasn't very American, but it's soul and took and enjoyed all the different flavors from around the world. Reggae, even Latin, of course, and jazz and everything, really.
Oh yeah, and that first album was a smash. Kissing to Be Clever in '81. The biggest hit, of course, was Do You Really Want to Hurt Me?
Yeah.
Tell me, why do you think it? Why do you think it spoke to listeners so much? I mean, you've written extensively about who it might not have been about, but we don't have to talk about that. I just want to talk about why you thought it spoke to listeners who, I don't know, maybe were falling in love but fearing heartbreak. Do you really want to hurt me? I mean, is that why it connected? You think?
I think I think when I was a kid as well, growing up in the world that I grew up in and being very different, I definitely had a different sense of what the world felt about me. And that crept very much into my writing. And also, if I look at what I write now, I never write from a victim point of view anymore. Those early songs are very like, everyone hates me. The world's horrible. No one loves me, So I feel like I was just expressing my kind of younger self, my younger unexperienced, really. I hadn't really been anywhere. I wrote that song before I'd even traveled. It's quite crazy that, I did this song that touched so many people, but my own experience of the world was quite limited at that point. I just had a really strong point of view.
So you're saying there was a bit of a naivety, victim complex that you had back then before, and yet you've reached people. So
I love that. We should call the next album Naive Victim Complex.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Well, no,
all the hits from the Insecure days.
That's what it should have been. That's great. No, but it was huge. And, and I'll Tumble For You was on there too. That was so playful. And Time, Clock of the Heart. So many. It added all up. You won the Grammy for Best New Artist. That was a huge deal. And it was that Strack.
Well, you just listed the first 4 songs of our set. You just literally listed I'll Tumble For You, It's a Miracle, Move Away. We do a great cover of that Bread song, Everything I Own, which I had a big hit with as a solo artist. So it's just sing along, don't stop singing more.
Awesome. So yeah, so all the ones I just lifted is the set openers. I love it. Well, people are gonna love to come out and hear all those.
Yeah.
I do want to know about the Color by Numbers album. That was like, I mean, it might be your most acclaimed, but Karma Chameleon is so catchy. And I'll tell you how I interpret it, then you can tell me what you think actually you meant. But I always read it as someone who's like, they're so worried about fitting in, trying to be a chameleon, that they aren't really true to who they actually are. And I guess your thesis is that there's some sort of karma to pay for that trying to fit in. Am I close?
Oh, very close. And it's kind of not just about, because when you write about other people, especially if you write about someone in an accusatory way, you did this to me, you remember that you're only talking about your own experience at that moment. And so you'll only ever see it from your side. But I think once you've made a song, it almost becomes the property of the listener, and they're allowed to kind of, as we all do, this suits my relationship, that's what he does to me, that's what she does to me. It's that stuff that is the common interest that we have with other people, because love is complex.
It really, really is. And then I noticed, after, those first couple albums, we're talking about like very personal sort of stories and of love, heartbreak, that kind of stuff. Then as the albums go on, you become a bit more of like a global topics. Like, the third album, you had the war song, and that, man, I'm telling you that line, war is stupid, people are stupid. I mean, that's still relevant today. Russia, Ukraine. I mean, say no more. But I mean, yeah, I mean, talk about sort of how you think you were sort of evolving to tackle more global themes and stuff like that.
Well, that song has come out of the mothballs because that song just, we got so much criticism for that song and we took it to heart. So that song was buried for years. And then I was somewhere and I heard a DJ playing some crazy 12-inch bootleg of the war song. And I heard that riff, dun, 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 and I was like, we should do this because it's kind of, it's gone past its kind of shame stage.
What'd you say, shame stage?
Yeah, it's the kind of song that Bob Dylan, it would curdle Bob Dylan's morning milk, wouldn't it? We're like, oh my God, can we get deeper here? But, it has a kind of beautiful innocence about it. And I feel like I've made up for it lyrically more recently. I think my lyrics have got a bit more kind of, simple in some ways and more complex, really.
I love it. I love it. Well, if that one was sort of, more of a global idea like war, I also wanted to ask you about, I guess around the same time, and maybe even that same year that song came out, you did the Band-Aid thing with Do They Know It's Christmas, raising money for famine in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
I think you're the second voice on the track, right? After Paul Young and before George Michael. I think you're second, right? Was it challenging to drop in on something like that and collaborate with so many, Bono and all? It's got to be a challenge.
Maybe everyone feels the same, though. Isn't that the funny thing? Because, I think even as an artist, you meet other artists and, you think you get a kind of interest. You think, oh, I understood what they're about. But you very rarely, I think even people well, it's hard to understand. So the kind of relationship between the artist and the person is always an interesting one. I think that's what people fall in love with. They fall in love with the sort of contradiction. I know I didn't answer your question, but, I think, when you're being personal as an artist, and, to some extent, I mean, around that time, he's talking about, there was a lot of vulnerability, there was a lot of outbursts, there was a lot of personality. I was very public. Everything that went on in my life was extremely public all the time, and that shaped the music that we made, shaped the decisions that we took, It's a crazy time.
It really was. It was a crazy time, but a lot of good music came out of it. And I mean, honestly, I feel like that Band-Aid thing, it sort of was before the Live Aid concert in '85, before We Are the World in '85. It sort of like, was, kicked off that sort of whole trend.
Yeah, I think that moment, Band-Aid, Live Aid, it's got more iconic, because of the distance. You know what I mean? At the time, there was a lot of politics around that time. I don't think anyone realized how massive it was until we lost Freddie Mercury and Bowie and all of that.
Yeah.
Suddenly that moment becomes, a more massive moment. So history can change, as well.
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned Bowie. Speaking of and earlier you mentioned when you were, a kid, you were just interested in like, oh, if that album sleeve is interesting, it looks good. Let's see if it sounds good. How important was, your metaphorical sleeve, the whole look, the visual, the David Bowie androgyny, the whole aura of Culture Club. But do you think the look of it was just as important as the actual music?
Well, I think, an artist, maybe even a human being as a totality, what you wear says a lot about who you think you are, how you carry yourself. If you look extreme and you walk into a room full of people, you have to have a certain personality to be able to carry that. Or you can also be uptight. A lot of artists dress up, they create this persona, and then want to keep everyone away from them. In case people get too close and realize it's not really who they are. And, for me, I've had so many very public experiences that I kind of feel that I'm comfortable with who Boy George is, because obviously Boy George is me. I'm not like talking about him like he's the third person, but the way people treat me when I'm in my finery, is very different. And so that's going to alter the way that I behave as well.
Yeah. Well, it's been fun following.
But I'm lovely.
Oh yeah, for sure. And
I'm always lovely, always lovely.
tons of fans through it all, through the ups and downs, all well documented. But don't need to even go into all of it on here. But you know what I mean? Your fans stick with you and are excited to see you at Wolf Trap. Thanks for doing this sort of abbreviated deep dive on some of those tracks. I mean, we didn't even get to Move Away and I Just Want to Be Loved. I mean, talk about your reggae influences on that one. But yeah, I mean, there's so many songs. You can hear them all at Wolf Trap in Virginia. I guess before, sort of in closing, like what would you, years, decades after you and I are both gone, and maybe someone digs this out of a fossil and listens to this interview, what would you want the lasting legacy of not only Boy George and Culture Club, but just that whole new romantic period too, like your whole new wave sound? What will be the legacy when music history is written?
I don't really think of I'm quite eclectic. I mean, in the last year, I put out 38 tracks. I must have released more tracks than any other artist, surely. I don't know, I haven't checked it, but I'm on this kind of mission to just put music out with no promotion, just let people find it. Because some of my favorite music I found through friends in their bedroom. Someone would be at a party, they'd play me some track. And I find that about music all different types of ways. Do you know what I mean? So for me, I just carry, because I realize now that everything already exists. Every guitar twang is the cousin of another guitar twang. Every drum has been played and, every note has been sung. So you're really just doing it from your perspective. And that's where the magic is, I think. The magic is in the person that does it. And what they're wearing, I think, is part of that. What they're wearing, what their politics are, what they eat. So much of it is important because it creates the character that you're putting out there.
So well said. Well, we can't wait to see the magic that you're talking about at Wolf Trap in Virginia. It'll be Thursday, September 1st, Boy George and Culture Club. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time to call in. We really, really appreciate it here in the nation's capital.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Be well. We'll see you soon.
See you soon, man. Bye.